Manipulation in Hunter x Hunter, one of the aura types a Nen user can have out of 6. Right now, currently in the manga, we're getting a lot of information about Nen, and in the last chapter, or chapter 362, we recently got more information about manipulation and the different types there are and different subcategories, and there's going to be spoilers for the manga in this video, so you have been warned. So basically, what I want to do in this video is cover manipulation and how the different subcategories and how it works, and talk about how some manipulators fall in each category. And there's a nice person on Reddit that made a whole little Nen encyclopedia about basically all the different types of Nen types and the different subcategories, so I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read all about that. But right now in this video, we're just going to focus on manipulation. First off, there's two types of different control. The most common one is indirect control, which the Nen user or the manipulator has some kind of controller or something that connects them to their target that they can use to control them. Like with Shalnark with his cell phone, he puts the antenna into his target and then he can control them with his cell phone. Or Illumi with his needles, he sticks it into his target and they are manipulated by him. That's the most common type and the one we see the most in the series, but there's also direct control, which they are rarer than the indirect control, and they don't necessarily need something to control them with some kind of item to control them. More rather, they just use their Nen to control their target. Like with Shoot, which he doesn't control a person, but he manipulates his hands with his Nen. There's a few of these we've seen, but for the most part, direct control is something we don't see that often. And then we get into another kinds of subcategories for manipulation. There's material manipulation, which these types of manipulators do not use living beings like an animal or a person, but more rather they use a material, they use an inanimate object that they manipulate. An example of this is Morel. Technically, Morel is a manipulator because he's using smoke that he manipulates to do a bunch of different things, like with smoky gel, which he manipulates that smoke to create a gel barrier. There's also his deep purple, which he uses to manipulate into these smoke soldiers. And there's also Kaluto Zoldyck, which he uses paper to manipulate. And then there's also Shoot, which he uses his hands. And then another type of manipulator that people usually think of is a living being manipulator. Basically, they just control a living being. So pretty much Illumi, Shalnark, and all those guys. They target a human being. Then we get into the different types of living being manipulators. There's the Coercive Type, which these type manipulators, they can take complete control of their victim, and their mind and their body have no free will, and they're forced to do the bidding of the manipulator. This one will be the most effective and the most powerful, but at the same time, that will take up the most aura because it will take a lot of aura to completely take all of their free will away. So basically, a character like Illumi with his needleman, which he sticks his needle into his targets and he completely controls them and they have no free will and they're forced to do his bidding. Then there's also Shalnark, which he sticks his antenna into them and then with his controller completely takes over that person. So this is the most effective type of manipulation, but it takes up the most aura. Then there's the Pseudo Cursive type, which these manipulators, they take control of their target's body, but they don't manipulate their mind. So their mind, they still have their free will, they have their free will to think, but their body is pretty much completely controlled by the manipulator. So this type of manipulation, it's basically like coercive, but just without their mind being taken over. So an example of this is Mizai's Storm, which he's a Zoldyck, and with his ability, he uses his cross game with his card. Once he activates it, then whoever is affected by his ability will get paralyzed. Their body is unable to move. They're completely paralyzed, but they still have the free will of their minds. And then there's the Soliciting type, which is a manipulator that leaves the free will of their target intact, but instead of manipulating, they influence their mind of their subject. They change their behavior and they're not really being manipulated, but they're being influenced to do what the manipulators influence them to do. So this is more like a request type ability, and an example of this would be Base, which was a character we saw early in York New, which with her ability, she can manipulate a person and to basically be their slave for like 180 minutes by kissing them, and then their mind is completely influenced by her, and they're like completely like in love with her, and they'll do whatever she wants. But there's also a few others, and then there's Kurolo with his fight with Hisoka when he shows an ability called the Order Stamp, which this one is kind of more up in the air, but it kind of seems to have soliciting type qualities. He creates a puppet of a person, and then he can stamp them, and then he can control them. If you think about it, it might seem like a coercive type because he's forcing them to do what he orders them, but these his targets still kind of have some free will within them, and if it goes against that original person's beliefs, then they can ignore the commands that Kurolo gives them. So they still have some free will, but if Kurolo gives like a basic command, then it'll kind of influence them to do what he wants them to do. So it can be considered a soliciting type if you think about it, but at once kind of up in the air. And then there's also Illumi with his hypnotic spell, and this one was the needle that Illumi used on Killua to keep him safe. And with this ability, Killua wasn't completely controlled by Illumi. His body wasn't like completely removed out of his free will. His mind, he still had some free will, but he was more influenced to be more cautious of opponents stronger than him and to run away if he couldn't handle a situation. And it was more like this needle was more influencing Killua instead of completely manipulating him, and it was done in a way that seemed like just something in Killua's personality rather than something that was completely manipulating him, since like Bisky and other people thought it was more in Killua's personality to be more cautious and to run away from dangerous situations. But in reality, it was more like a soliciting type manipulation. So that's pretty much all we have for manipulation so far. There may be more information about this, but right now the Dark Continent's given us a lot of information with like in terms of the world, and it's done a lot of world building, talked about the different countries, but it has also done a lot for expanding on Nen, since a bunch of all these types of manipulation we didn't know about until this arc, and we got a lot more about Nen too, like with the Nen beast, the parasitic types, all of that, and we're probably gonna get more throughout this arc. So right now Hunter x Hunter is pretty crazy right now, and hopefully the hiatus won't be too much to handle. So the Dark Continent arc is really doing a lot for the series right now. So that's been it for this video. What do you think about it? What do you think about all this manipulation stuff? Leave a comment down below detailing your thoughts. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe for more content, follow me on Twitter, and check out my anime list to know what I'm watching. So until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.